Curiosity. Kill the rat. Curiosity. Kill the rat.
Sup, guys, and welcome to episode 3. Episode 3, Matt. We actually did it. We've actually. This is a real thing now. You realize
Third time's
that, right?
the charm. We're officially a show now. We can call it, like, 100%.
We're
Oxford
gonna have
Dictionary,
to-
you look it up. What a show is. It says 3 episodes. It's right there.
Does this mean we're going to have to keep doing this?
I mean, the beauty of doing your own stuff and being your own boss and freelancing is if we wanted, we could stop right now, but I don't
All
think
right,
we
bye.
want to.
Thank you for listening. That is
And
the end
that
of the
was
episode.
the final episode of Curiosity Killed the Rat. Tune
No,
in next
no,
week
it was
for
not.
nothing.
Hush. No. Episode 3 of many of Curiosity Killed the Rat, science podcast where we try to make science as fun and as interesting for you guys as possible. I'm Kate and I get rats drunk. For research. Yeah, Yes, I do research in addiction neuroscience, but I geek out over all sorts of science.
I'm Matt. I'm the sound guy.
The sound guy. And also a wonderful part of the podcast.
Oh, thanks, B. Yeah, I
Your
try.
banter makes it.
Oh, look, otherwise we'd just be exposition on tape.
No one wants to listen to me for half an hour straight, which is also another reason why today, super exciting, we have a super awesome guest joining us. We have Dr. Linden Ashcroft. Welcome, Linden.
Thanks for having me, Kate and Matt. I can't believe I get to be part of the 3rd episode. Very excited to be here.
We're so excited to have you. So Linden is a climate scientist and science communication extraordinaire, but, has now definitely reached the peak of her career getting to come on Curiosity Killed the Rat.
That's it.
It's all downhill from
Complete.
here for you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to break the news
Yeah.
to you this way, but Dems the brakes.
This is where it peaks for you. Yeah. So the reason we have Linden on today and the reason I wanted to have Linden come on the show is because we wanted to really use this episode to talk about something really important and something that I'm not very qualified to talk about and Linden is far more qualified to talk about than me. So we've brought in the big guns for this one. Tell us, Linden, what are we about to learn about today?
Well, as I understand it, you guys have brought me in to talk about, the only thing that people are really talking about in Australia and maybe around the world at the moment, which is, of course, the devastating bushfires that have torn through at least 10 million hectares in Australia since they started in September.
10 million hectares.
It's too many hectares.
Causing many deaths of people, many, many more deaths of animals and plants and destroying a lot of homes as well. So, I mean, we can talk about the fires, we can talk about climate, we can talk about climate change, we can, talk about clouds coming from thunderstorms making their own weather. I'm here to talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, I don't know, Matt. Do you have any specific questions for our climate scientists regarding these? Because you were evacuated, weren't you, from your house the other week?
Well, not like strictly evacuated, but we did get the call out on like social media and government websites and that sort of thing that kind of within our region there was a bushfire happening and the kind of circumference that they drew out for which houses should evacuate was like a block away from us. So we kind of were like, it's probably for the best that we just kind of, yeet out of here just in case. It all ended up being okay. The fires around Atwell, they put them out pretty quickly, and I think it was just sort of the parks around the area that got burnt down. I don't think any houses got destroyed. But there were fires cropping up.
Scary shit, man.
Yeah,
shit.
It was interesting. It was a little bit anxiety inducing, but I reckon me and my housemates, we got our stuff together pretty quickly and calmly, and we went
you're
down
a
to
group
a
of
parent's
pretty
place.
level-headed blokes, so
Something that was quite interesting that happened though on the drive down to we went to one of my housemates' parents' place just to hang out for the couple of hours while we were waiting for it all to blow over. And on the way down, we passed another bushfire that just started up as we left.
Oh my God,
that was actually starting to smoke up and kind of head towards where we chose to evacuate to. So we're thinking, shit, are we going to have to leave this house now and go somewhere else? They ended up putting that fire out as well, and it was all good. Those fires were nowhere near as big as the ones that were going on down at Baldivis and even Esperance.
Yeah.
And that. WA has been pretty lucky considering some of the other stuff that's been going on.
Yeah,
on the
well,
East
that's the
Coast.
thing, because you're over in Western Australia. For those who don't know, Matt and I are actually on opposite sides of the country. Ta-da! And yeah, so I'm here in Melbourne, in Victoria, where we've had awful air quality and from all the smoke from all the fires over here on the East Coast. But there's been stuff, it's been getting a lot less publicity, but there have been fires over in Western Australia as well. And it's pretty scary. But the question that comes to mind that I really want to dive into that I think is getting debated a lot, and I'm hearing a lot of misinformation. It's really pissing me off. What is the link between climate change and these fires? Like, it's a big question. It's a loaded question. But like, yes, these fires are, for the most part, from what I understand, caused by, lightning storms or lightning strikes or arson or whatever. But is climate change playing a role in these bushfires, or is this just like standard news for Australia? Like, we've always had bushfires.
You're right, Kate. We have always had bushfires. So let's sort of unpack that a little bit. What do you need to make a fire? You need fuel. So you need stuff to burn, and that stuff needs to be dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need quite a dry environment with a lot of evaporation. You need weather conditions to be just right so that when a fire kicks off, there's wind to help it grow and all those kinds of things. And, of course, you need that spark. You need something to get the fire going, whether that is lightning strike or, I don't know, a sun on a magnifying glass or someone lighting a match, someone dropping a cigarette. There's lots of different things that can start a fire.
I heard the Baldivis one, Matt, that was near you got caused by a guy's boat trailer.
Yeah,
like
a guy was
the
driving
wheel
along
bearing
the sides
broke.
of the road. The wheel broke on this trailer, and the sparks that came from the trailer just sparked off into the bush on the side and caused this massive fire that
The poor
they
guy,
couldn't put out for like a week. It was,
Wow.
He felt so bad. He went on national TV and apologized and was like, I've been vomiting. I feel so sick. It's all my fault. And it's like, dude, it was an accident. But
But still, I mean, this is the thing. We're all, I guess it doesn't matter where you are. I didn't realize there were so many fires on the West Coast, but I know so many people who've been affected in the last few weeks, myself included. I spent quite a few days running from a fire in East Gippsland. We were supposed to be there over New Year's, but we decided to leave just before they closed the roads. And instead of watching the fireworks or celebrating, we drove 10 hours to escape ducking and weaving from all the different bushfires in different states. And so many people know friends or family or, workmates or someone else who was going to go down to the beach or who was going to go here or who was just chilling at home and then sort of had to deal with these problems. But if we think about those 4 things that fires need, right? So they need a lot of fuel. We have had 3 dry years in a row. We need a lot of fuel and it needs to be dry. So we have had 3 dry years in a row across Eastern Australia.
Yep.
And 2019 was actually Australia's driest year on record.
Oh, on record?
The driest
year ever?
Yeah, the driest year since records began in 1900 by quite a significant margin. If you look at the graph on Twitter, you have to click on the image on Twitter to see 2019. It was so dry. Like it's hidden at the bottom of the image. It was such a dry year, right?
That's scary.
It was also the hottest year on record.
Oh, that's not a good combination.
Not by a little bit either. We really knocked it out of the park this year with heat. Now, one of the reasons for that is because this year we had what's known as a positive Indian Ocean dipole. So this is a bit of
cool.
climate
Those
stuff.
are words
What
that
do
I
those
understand.
words mean? I understood Indian Ocean, and that's about it.
So a dipole is when you've got 2 poles, right?
Okay.
That checks out.
Di to pole, pole.
Yep,
so
cool.
you've got an east and a west side of the Indian Ocean.
Gotcha.
And the temperatures on the east and west side of the Indian Ocean kind of seesaw as the winds across that Indian Ocean strengthen or weaken. And when the winds across the Indian Ocean strengthen, right, they blow from the east to the west. So they blow kind of towards the Western Indian Ocean. And if they're stronger than normal, then they push warm water from the surface across to the west, leaving cool water underneath. You look confused. Is that
no?
Does that sort of make sense?
That's my processing phase.
Yeah,
I'm
okay,
processing the
good.
information. Yeah.
So if those winds are stronger than normal, then you'll get warmer water on the western side of the Indian Ocean, cooler water off the coast of Indonesia.
Yes,
right?
cool.
That's a positive Indian Ocean dipole. These things happen every few years or so. It's kind of like your El Niños and La Niñas. I don't know. You might not be super familiar with them, Matt, because you're on the west.
I remember briefly reading about El Ninas or whatever it is in year 8 NAPLAN. I think in NAPLAN testing, it came up briefly, and that's literally the only time I've ever heard of it. So I know it's something to do with weather, and I know it's, I don't know, presumably something to do with around the equator region because it's in Spanish.
Yes.
That's my
Good
knowledge
deduction.
of it.
So El Nino events and La Nina events happen in the Pacific Ocean, and this is the same kind of thing. So you can either get, if you have El Nino, which is the boy in Spanish, and it's called that because way back in the way, the South American fishermen were noticing around Christmas time the birth of the boy. They would either notice really good fishing levels or really poor fishing levels, depending on the level of nutrients in the water. And if you've got cool water kind of upwelling or coming up from deeper down, then you've got lots of nutrients, so you'll get good fish. And if you've got lots of warmer surface water sloshing around, then you'll get poorer quality water, so you'll get fewer fish. Right? Yeah. So if you've got good fish in around South America, that is what's known as a La Nina event, because you've got cool water over there and all the warm surface water gets sloshed to the other side of the Pacific Ocean. So we get warm water off the coast of Australia, off the east coast of Australia. That's called a La Nina event. And on the other side of the scale, when you get an El Nino event, so that's the boy, you get warmer water off the coast of South America, cooler water than normal, off our eastern coast. And those two events, a La Nina event, we have more, if you've got more warm water in the ocean or like on the surface of the ocean, that means there's more moisture available. It evaporates a little bit more. You get more moisture in the atmosphere, so it's sort of easier to make it rain. Yeah. So these events we generally associate with floods in Australia. Like El Nino events you normally associate with droughts in Australia. Right. So that's the big one. And lots of people on the east coast just sort of think El Nino equals drought, La Nina equals flood. That's one thing that normally happens, right? But nothing was going on in the Pacific Ocean this year. All eyes on the Indian Ocean. Right. Where a positive Indian Ocean dipole, when you have cooler than normal waters off the coast of Indonesia, means that it cuts off a really important source of moisture for us. Okay. So we had fewer clouds. We had a lot less rain this year. Yeah. So coming all the way back to the fires. Yeah. Sorry for the Climate Science 101.
Oh, no, that's good.
That's necessary. I'm not a climate scientist.
I knew literally none of that, so.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that the oceans that are far away from us can really affect our weather and climate.
Just to clarify real quick, it's been a very long time since I've done geography and I don't have a globe handy. The Indian Ocean, that's off the north of Australia, isn't it?
Yes.
Near, like India. So it's like we've got the Pacific on the east, the Indian at the north, and then is it the Atlantic to the west? No, that's like near America. I don't know.
Isn't Atlantic?
No, I think the Indian Ocean is kind of to our north and to our west.
Oh, okay, so the
Atlantic kind of wraps around.
Right, and then it turns into the Southern Ocean underneath.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, right. The Atlantic we don't.
It's somewhere else.
Sure. Okay. The Indian Ocean's just kind of real big and gives us a nice little booty hug around the side of West Australia and Northern Australia. So like the Indian Ocean is the big spoon to Australia's little spoon.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I see that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Beautiful. I'm picturing it. Yes, Pacific off the east coast, Indian off the west coast. What was I saying?
Fires.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So we have had the strongest positive Indian Ocean dipole event that's ever been recorded this year, which is interesting. We'll come to the climate change question in a minute. Now I'm still thinking about what fires need.
Yeah.
So it's been really dry. It's been really hot.
Yep.
Okay. It's been really dry so that we haven't had that much rain. So we've also had fewer clouds, which in addition to the heat has helped evaporate a lot of moisture, right, from the soil. So the soil and the trees, lots of different trees, including rainforests, are like bone dry.
Yes.
Yes. So we've got lots of fuel. Ideal. The reason that we have lots of fuel, maybe, I mean, it's a complicated question and I don't want to get into fuel reduction burning and the politics behind those kinds of things. But what I will say from a climate point of view is that normally people will reduce the amount of fuel that there is by doing burns in the cool season, right? When it's safe, when the weather's quite calm. So if you do light a fire, it's not going to get out of control.
But we haven't been able to do that, right?
Exactly.
Because the cool season's been getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Exactly. Yeah. So there hasn't been as many opportunities this year to reduce the amount of fuel.
Yeah.
Because temperatures are warmer, because the weather's been things are hotter and the window's getting smaller and smaller to be able to do that. So there's your first sign of climate change there, right?
Yeah.
So we had lots of fuel. It was very dry.
Honestly, that's even enough to just convince me that it's climate change's fault. I hate that you're like, that's the first sign.
Well, it's hard this year
There's
because
more.
I think the communicator in me and the person that really wants climate action in me is like, yes, it's all climate change, all of it. And actually, the science behind bushfires and climate change has been there for a really long time.
Yeah.
Like there have been reports since the mid-2000s, even earlier. I saw a report online today that was published in the late 80s that were like,
Oh, wow.
climate change and bushfires is bad. There have been people researching this in Australia for 40 years, and it's been very clear for a long time that increasing the amount of greenhouse gases, increasing the amount of energy in the atmosphere, increasing the temperatures will make bushfire seasons longer, bushfires more intense and more frequent. Right? But this year has been interesting. Like as a scientist, you need to kind of look through all the different ingredients and be like, where's the climate change signal there? Where's the climate change signal there? From the fuel point of view, yes, you can definitely see that signal. I think, anyway, not knowing a lot about fire management, but understanding that kind of fuel relationship and thinking also this year that, you know, places burnt that weren't supposed to burn, you know.
What do you mean by that?
Rainforests burned this year.
Yeah, I read about that just earlier today, actually, why the fires are so much bigger and more severe than they have been in the previous years, that these rainforests that are supposed to be permanently wet and as a result of that unable to catch fire because it's not dry fuel. You can't go throwing a wet log on a campfire, you'll just get smoke. Have been dry enough to go up in flames as well. And we've been losing these massive forests that, to my knowledge in our history, haven't really been burnt before.
Yeah, these are Gondwana land level forests, you know, they're sort of dinosaur age type ecosystems. And that, you know, seeing a polar bear on a melting iceberg makes me sad, but thinking of a rainforest burning, that really undoes me. It really breaks my heart to think of that.
Yeah, honestly, that's terrifying because
Like how old would some of the oldest trees in these rainforests be, do you reckon?
I've got no idea. I did see an article, you know, the Wollemi pine, that really, really ancient dinosaur pine that's that lives in the Wollemi National Park to the west of Sydney. And how they rescued that. They managed
I saw that. Oh, so good.
So beautiful.
I haven't heard this story.
Oh, so the Wollemi pine was only discovered in the 80s. Some of the trees in this small, the only wild population of Wollemi pines that they think exist in the whole world might be as old, I read, as 100,000 years.
Yeah,
you know?
they're called dinosaur trees. They're like think of how old dinosaurs are, like that sort of, you know. These are the sorts of trees that dinosaurs were stomping around with. Yeah. And they're still here.
Yeah, there's a secret wild population of them, so secret that nobody is allowed to know where it is in case people, trample all over it and contaminate
ruin it because humans suck.
People just get excited and they don't clean their boots, you know.
Because humans suck, Linden.
Sometimes, yes, some humans do suck, but some humans would just be really eager beavers and would be like, I want to go see those pines.
You're right.
But then they'd like bring in all sorts of contaminants and stuff. Anyway, the Wollemi pines are under threat, and so the New South Wales government did a whole like secret mission to try to protect them, and they managed to protect them, which is
I'd love to see a movie made about that secret mission to save
100%. There will be. There will be a movie.
Exactly the same thing. I will watch that TV show and I will cry
TV
like
show,
a little girl.
Movie, doco, book.
Absolutely.
All of it. I want all of it.
But, I mean, they're the oldest trees that I know of, and I imagine some of those rainforest trees, if not that particular tree, then that species in that environment, have been around, you know, really a really long time. Anyway, so coming back to the climate change thing.
Yes.
This positive Indian Ocean dipole event thing is it's the strongest one we've seen on record. And that is a driver of a lot of the dry that happened this year. Finding the climate change fingerprint on that is a bit trickier.
Yeah,
but some researchers have suggested that these kind of events will happen more in the future and be more extreme. Crazy. Because one side of the Indian Ocean's heating up more than the other side.
That's what we want. More of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that happened that made this year particularly just perfect for bushfires. Perfect's not the word. What's the word for like perfect but awful? Diabolical.
Ideal.
Yeah. Catastrophic, I suppose, is the word I'm looking for.
Yep.
Is that the weather systems that we normally get that swing around the Southern Ocean. You know, you're in Perth, Matt. We're here in Melbourne. You get those cold fronts that bring like big weather changes, big temperature changes. Those kind of patterns moved a little bit further north than normal. for the last couple of months of the year due to some crazy shit that was going on above Antarctica, which is another conversation for another day.
Yeah.
The climate change signal there's not that much of a signal that we can see. It was just a really rare thing that happens sometimes above Antarctica that then trickles down to the layer of the atmosphere where our weather is and really moves our weather systems around. And there was science that was published earlier this year actually saying if that happens, bushfire risk is really increased. And that's exactly what happened.
And it's what happened.
Yeah. And as a scientist, you're like, oh, geez, you don't see this very often. This is exciting. Like it's good data collection, but also, shit, I hope this doesn't actually happen because this could be really bad. And that's exactly what happened.
It has been really bad. It's been devastatingly bad.
Yeah. So my feeling and my understanding of the science is that climate change's grubby fingerprints are all over these fires. And I'm not the only one who says that. You know. You've got to listen to lots of scientists. You can't just listen to one. You have to weigh up the evidence, right? And always be skeptical.
Sure.
But lots of scientists have been saying this for a really long time.
Is this large event that's been happening in the Indian Ocean, what was it? Was it La Nina or El Nino?
It's an positive Indian Ocean dipole. Doesn't have a sexy Spanish name.
Positive Indian Ocean dipole. I think that's sexier.
PIOD.
PIOD. A PO.
Peod. Love me a good peod.
But has that got something to do with the cyclone that's been brewing at the northwest of Australia?
Wait, there's a cyclone as well?
Oh, well, sort of like the early beginnings of the cyclone. It's like, I don't know. I read about this a few days ago, so it might have been and gone, but I do remember reading that there's like very severe storms in kind of the northwest around Broome, kind of going up towards the Northern Territory. That could be the beginnings of a cyclone.
Interestingly, the cyclone is a signal that the Peod, which is a name we've just made up, by the way. No one in the scientific community calls them that.
We're coining it now. If you start using it, you owe your royalties to Curiosity Killed the Rat. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
The fact that cyclones are developing and we're finally getting thunderstorms up in Darwin is a sign that the Peod is breaking down.
Ooh.
Which is good. And so in the last week, we've started to get the monsoon rains. Before that, the monsoon kind of arrived late in the northern part of Australia this year, which meant heat could just build and build and build and build and build over the country without any rain or clouds to dissipate it. And so that's why we've had a lot of heat waves, particularly in December. But now we are starting to see some of that rain. The Peod's breaking down. So there's rain happening. There's rain falling on the East Coast. There's cyclones coming and there'll be more before the season's out. Because you got to remember too, like we're recording this in the middle of January. We've still got 2 months of summer to go.
Yeah, that's the
like
craziest
not even
part of the fires to me is that they all kind of sparked up. It was still spring. We were barely in bushfire season. We weren't. At the
fires do happen
yet.
in spring pretty regularly, I reckon, in New South Wales,
but not to the same
but not
extent.
You're right, not to the same extent. And I think that edge, that envelope of when they start is just moving further and further into wintertime, which sucks because we need sort of the American firefighters, and if they're over there fighting their fires or they need us.
Yeah, because they get some pretty bad fires over there as well, especially in like California and stuff. Yeah, man. Yeah. If we weren't depressed enough already, sorry, this has been a really downer of an episode, but I think it's a really important topic to talk about.
It's a huge topic that's really hard to address without being a little bit depressing about it, because it is a depressing topic, but it needs to be addressed because it's happening right now. The fires are still going right now as we speak, right?
Like, people have lost everything.
Homes, lives.
And my next depressing follow-up was going to be, so these fires, I read somewhere that they are the fires alone have released 400 million metric tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, which is more than the total combined annual emissions of the 116 lowest emitting countries. That's the statistic I read. Like that, what? That is like Australia, we get a bad rap for our CO2 emissions as it is from coal mining and stuff like that. But bushfires, stuff that's to an extent out of our control, like that's making climate change worse. Is this just like a self-perpetuating spiral of doom that we've found ourselves in? Sorry to be dramatic, but
an awful feedback loop of flames and smoke and hellscape.
Well, okay, I will pump the science brakes there for
Please.
a second. Everyone take a deep breath.
Calm me down, please.
Don't worry, climate change. Continue to worry. Climate change is really terrifying.
Continue to
and
worry.
only going to get worse.
Cool. Done.
But for bushfires, you're right. 400. I've read that as well. 400 million tons of carbon dioxide being emitted by these fires. I think annually Australia, our budget is 530 million.
Right. So we've used up almost all of it.
Well, sort of, but no, that's kind of our emissions from industry. Right. So when
okay. Oh, yeah.
So what I know, what I understand for bushfires is that they are generally, on balance, carbon neutral.
Okay. How does that
bushfires
work?
do happen. We've always had bushfires in Australia. There've been bushfires. Bushfires are a thing that happen naturally, have happened before we started pumping all of this carbon into the atmosphere at the start of the Industrial Revolution. And so if you burn a bunch of bush or grass, whatever it is, that grass and those trees will regrow. And when they do, they take up carbon dioxide. New trees are better, from what I understand, at soaking up CO2. So on balance, that is a carbon neutral activity. If you think about the whole planet and you think about the specific beautiful temperature at which all of the species on the planet have evolved, they have evolved with these short-term variations of bushfires or volcanoes kind of in mind. Small short-term changes where emitting carbon dioxide and then sucking it back up again kind of happens.
But do you think with the increased like scale and length of time that the bushfire season is lasting and just pure, acreage that the bushfires are covering, like are we going to be burning out far more than we're going to be regrowing like now compared to in the past?
You're totally right there, Kate, because that's exactly the point. Now that these bushfires are happening more often and they're larger, the forests don't have time. They don't have enough of a chance to suck that carbon back up into the atmosphere. So I think it's like the science or the maths of doing that, how much is taken up versus how much is emitted and how that's quite messy, I reckon. It's not.
It's not a.
In some respects, like the atmosphere doesn't really care where the carbon comes from. It's there or it's not there.
Yeah.
But trying to figure out how much less efficient forests, bush is now at soaking up carbon, because you've got to think about the types of leaves, how fast they're growing, how much water they require to grow, because soil can also take up
moisture. Where is that water going
to
come from?
Exactly, take up carbon. And if the soil's really dry, is it going to take up carbon or is it not going to take up carbon? Like that is complicated science.
Could
valuable but complicated.
Could another weird aspect be in like next year or the next couple of years, because of the massive scale that's actually burnt down in this last year or so, the next couple of years we might see less bushfires just because there's literally nothing left to burn?
Ooh, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, good question. Fewer bushfires in the future. Well, I mean, there's still a bit to burn, I guess.
Yeah. And there's not just Australia to burn.
That's true. I had a bit of a look at, there's a satellite that's run by the US and they kind of look at how much area has been burnt. And Victoria, so far, it's been sort of the third largest area burnt since the satellite was launched. There were bushfires a long time ago, back in, I think it was 1851. It might have been 1939. They've always, how we've got a Black Saturday, there's a Black Friday, a Black Thursday. One of those black days, a quarter of Victoria burnt.
Yeah, wow.
Which is...
That's huge.
That's huge. That's huge.
When did that happen?
It was either 1939 or 1851.
Very similar dates.
Okay. Both of those days, very black days. Both of those days caused a lot of destruction and devastation. It might have been 1939, I think. So Victoria is like the third largest area that's burnt since the satellite went up, which I think might have been in the 80s or maybe the early 90s. The New South Wales fires... It's bigger. It's like bigger, 4 times as big as the biggest amount of area that's burnt before.
Some graph of New South Wales where it was just like this time was just like obscenely
over a year, I suppose. And the Queensland fires, there has been an area burnt, but of course there are fires in northern Queensland every year, just as there are fires in northern Australia every year as well. And so balancing those out, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that I still think there's shit that can be burnt.
Yeah. Okay.
And what I have seen or what I understand from some ecosystems is that they are able to be burnt at a frequency that they are not that's not healthy for them. You know, lots of Australian trees and even insects and animals, like they need the fire to rejuvenate and to grow and and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But that's because I believe they've evolved
to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. To deal with that at a certain frequency, you know?
Yeah.
Like the Alpine National Park, for example, alpine gum trees, they haven't evolved to burn down every 5 years. And that's very hard to recover from. So it would be nice to be optimistic and think there's not much left to burn, and maybe you're right.
But we're not out of the woods yet. Pardon the pun.
I don't know. I'm not quite sure about that.
Oh man. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to?
I'm trying to think of something positive.
Is there anything optimistic? Because it's been a very, very doom and gloom episode.
It has been a very depressing episode so far.
Okay, let me have a think. Positives that I can see from this horrible tragedy. This is a perfect example of what the future might look like, which, yes, is freaking...
How is that positive?
No, it's freaking terrifying, but it has really brought people internationally together.
Yeah,
and they're like,
actually, that's true.
Whoa.
Huge.
Exactly. Like, don't mess with the koalas. Do you know what I mean? And I think
and the wombats, oh my gosh, the story about the wombats shepherding the little animals into their burrows, I teared up.
I'm not sure if that's actual science.
Really?
Yeah, I feel
I'm
like
really sorry.
As much as I
shitting
loved
on
that
all of the
headline, when I
things.
saw it, I was kind of like, I mean, I haven't fact-checked this at all, and
No,
it
I
just
didn't
seems too
fact-check
good
it
to be
either.
true. It's just...
Lots of animals use wombat burrows, but I don't think Senior Wombat is being like, come with me if you want to live. I don't really think that's happening.
Like my favorite was like the Lord of the Rings meme with the
yeah.
heartbroken.
I mean, I
that's
first
not
saw that
right.
like posted on like a particular political party's website, and they were using it against another political party, and I was kind of like, as wholesome as that
Okay.
story is, it's probably like they're probably just making it up for a certain agenda, which is unfortunate.
The wombats deserve a mention. There was a really great article in The Conversation about how wombat burrows are super important for survival of lots of species during fire, but it's not actually the wombats doing. Wombats are bastards. Like, their bums can smash human skulls. Like, they are hardcore.
What?
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm terrified of wombats now. Cool. Add that to the list of anxieties.
Let me think about
Positives,
positive
Linden.
things. The bushfires have really brought people together. It's really galvanized the community. How many incredible stories have you heard of people
that's
helping, of
so
people
true.
volunteering, of people giving? It's really motivating to see how many people really care, right? It's incredible to me. These fires are so huge, 10 million hectares burnt, and yet the loss of life has been much less than, say, the Black Saturday fires 10 years ago.
That's actually true. Yeah.
That's incredible.
I mean, I can't remember what the death toll is currently. I want to say
It's around 25 last
25,
I read.
which is still 25 more than it should be. That still in itself is a tragedy. However, compared to the lives lost in many, many other like bushfire tragedies, as you mentioned, it's outstanding. I mean, we lost 500 million animals, but
At least.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see when it all calms down a bit and the scientists check how many animals have gone endangered or maybe even extinct.
Sometimes people be like, oh, you're a climate scientist. That must be really hard. And, you know, working with the depressing stuff all day. But ecologists and botanists and biologists, they just see it so much more, you know.
yeah.
Climate data doesn't look you in the eye with its cute little
And
face.
say, save me.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
All right, positive things.
Positive things.
Another positive thing that I've thought of, this is pure speculation, right?
Yeah.
And this comes back to Climate Science 101. I talked about volcanic eruptions before, and if you have a big volcanic eruption, right, in the past we've seen it, you get a lot of stuff being spewed high up into the atmosphere, right? And that often can shelter the Earth from some of the sun's energy. For a year or two sometimes, you can see a small decrease in global temperature.
There you go.
For a year or two, maybe
That's
just
really
1
cool.
year.
Yeah.
So like Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, and you can see that on the global temperature record, like the temperature dropped. So again, pure speculation. I've done no modelling on this.
is that kind of like the same basis as the whole idea of a nuclear winter? Like the idea of a nuclear apocalypse happens and there's just mushroom clouds everywhere and all the debris goes up, blocks out enough sunlight that the world goes into sort of a mini ice age. Well, maybe not a full ice age. If it was a nuclear apocalypse scenario, then yeah, it might be a mini ice age kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. There's a lot of strong science behind that. And that's exactly sort of what a nuclear winter is. And some of these fires were so big and so strong and the weather conditions were just right that they created their own thunderstorms. And so they shot some smoke and cloud high up into the atmosphere. I don't know if you've seen the videos online of the smoke kind of circumnavigating.
Oh, actually,
the
yeah.
Earth.
I heard about it. I haven't seen the video,
Should be
but
in
I did hear
Perth
about it.
any time now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, we've been missing out on the smoke over here. We've been blue skies all around. It's I mean, except for the few fires that have popped off. A couple of days ago, I was talking about, oh man, I'm getting a lot of Survivors Guild over in WA because we're really not seeing the worst of the fires like what they're getting over in the eastern states, but it's still happening in the same country, when there's a lot of family over there and that. And like the next day we got evacuated and that as well. So it was kind of
that
like,
was really funny, yeah. Oh, well, not funny. Funny's the wrong word.
I think some
Just
big
crazy.
fires have still happened in WA, like in around Esperance, that sort of area. For a little bit, a lot of the grocery shops had things up saying where we can't get a lot of produce in because of the fires that are in Esperance, kind of around
Esperance
that
is just
Nullarbor.
so remote. Like
It's-
Esperance is a good, for those of you who don't know, it's how many hour drive from Perth? At least 8 hours.
At least 8
drive from
hours if you're
Perth.
non-stopping it and cutting like through the middle. It's on the south coast,
Yeah.
but in Western Australia.
It's like, as south as you can get, and it's a long way away from any big cities.
It would be like a lot of those coastal communities in the eastern part, like Malakuta or
Yeah.
Eden, Merimbula, equidistant
Exactly.
from Melbourne and Sydney, 8 hours each way.
Yeah.
Very
Similar
hard
situation, which
get
is just
out
so
of.
unfortunate that those are the places going up in smoke, like in flames, because
Yeah.
But,
But so the positive of that was that maybe, I haven't done any modelling on this, maybe these big clouds have sent some smoke high enough up into the atmosphere that they might act as to help us, buy us a couple more years or even 6 more months of slightly
we'll
cooler
take whatever we
temperatures.
can get at this point, right? Like Look, all right, let's focus on that actual positive of how well everyone has rallied together, and it's been amazing seeing the international celebrities and even Australian-born celebrities really driving the fundraising and the support and that. And
Yeah, I never thought I'd retweet Russell Crowe.
I love Russell Crowe.
When he was like, respect the science. And I thought, yeah, man.
He was good in everything
Thanks.
except Les Mis.
I was gonna say Russell Crowe ruined my favorite musical character ever.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
Javert. Oh, anyway.
Very poor casting
Apart from
choice.
that,
Wholesome
he's
gentleman,
fine.
just not the best baritone.
But
I
we
second
won't
that.
judge Russell Crowe. You know what? I will. I've judged Russell Crowe, but he respects the science, and I respect him for that. No, where I was gonna go with that is. In terms of everyone rallying together, Matt, I believe you've pulled together a few little
I have.
I can't think of the word.
Charities is the word you're looking for.
If you are sitting at home right now listening to this podcast being like, well, shit, this sucks.
I was reeling for
Is
some
there
hopeful
anything I can
things
do?
I could do, but now I'm just feeling more hopeless. Well, feel hopeless no more, dear listener, for do we have the deal for you? A number of charities.
Best places to chuck your money and your love and your support at if you want to help people affected by these bushfires.
Right.
Take it away, Matt.
I did a little bit of research, and the main two big major charity organizations that are doing a lot of work for places are the Red Cross and the RSPCA. So the Red Cross, obviously helping out the people and the families affected by the bushfires, and the RSPCA is actually, actively trying to help all of the animals that haven't been killed by the bushfires but have been, displaced because their habitats have been completely destroyed or may have been injured by the fires as well. I've also found a charity organization called the Animal Rescue Collective. Basically, these guys they're a peak body of kind of underfunded animal rescue organizations. They have specialized knowledge about their specific areas, so it's kind of a more if you don't want to support big charities, you want to go more of a local level, that's an option you can go with as well. And depending on what state you're in as well, I found one for the Victorian Bushfires, the Community Enterprise Foundation. They've partnered up with the Victorian Government, Bendigo Bank, and the Salvation Army. And then I've also got a link to Emergency WA that has a number of different links for various rural bushfire services around WA, as well as a couple of larger charity organisations. And then at the bottom of the list as well, I found a list of charities that has been released by the Australian government. That's just a complete list of all of these different charities, depending what you want to support, whether you want to support the fire services, animal services, people displaced, and all of them have been vetted by the ACNC, which is the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission. And on this website as well, they have a link to a place where you can look up a charity's ABN or search up the name of the charity, and you can like confirm whether or not this charity is legit, or whether they're because there has been a little bit of misinformation spread around and like a couple of scam charity things set up trying to like say that they raise money for the bushfires, but they're not really, or they're not sending it to the right place. So it's a way to double check that or fact check if there are any other charities you wanted to support as well.
Yeah. Well, all of these links that Matt's just talked about, we'll chuck up in the description of this podcast. So you'll be able to find them all there if you want to reach out and chuck a bit of coin, do your bit to feel a little bit less helpless in
do
this
your bit to feel less shit.
Yeah, do your bit to feel less shit. I like that. That's great. Yeah, so with that, should we scoot along to the fun part of the podcast? The fun part of the podcast.
The listener question. This whole thing has been a drag up until now.
No, I hate that.
It has been pretty heavy. Surely, we've talked about quite some heavy stuff today, some pretty sad things. So surely the question from the listener, you knew that you had a climate scientist coming in, you had a question that was perky, something about, our beautiful planet's climate that had nothing to do with climate change, something perky, something happy?
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, look. So the question we have is it's a really interesting question from Nige, is why does the lack of natural light make people sad? So like people living in, the top of the northern hemisphere or people who work in windowless workplaces, like what is it about the lack of natural light that can really make people depressed? I don't laugh at people being depressed. I just laugh at how depressing this episode is. I am so sorry, guys. Please keep listening to the show.
That's also like tied into seasonal depression disorder, isn't it? Where
exactly.
People get more sad in winter time because there's less light level. I don't know why that is, but I just know it's a thing.
That's the thing. I was going to say, like, seasonality is a real thing, and it affects, the majority of people, but it can manifest in its most extreme form as seasonal affective disorder, quite aptly shortened to SAD. SAD. Yeah, seasonal affective disorder. So I don't know, Linden, do you want to talk about it? Do you want me to talk about it?
I kind of feel like this topic is something that you would know more about than me. I mean, my little understanding of seasonal affective disorder, apart from that, it's a real thing.
Yeah, it is.
It's in the massive book of disorders that lots of psychologists refer to.
And Statistical Manual.
That's the one.
Yep.
And, there have been studies done in the past that have exposed people to light and then their symptoms have kind of gone away. But the actual part behind it, when I read about it, I was like, that's a neuroscience question.
It is.
Kate's like, I'll bring you a climate question, but that's a lie.
I brought you a climate question masquerading as a neuroscience question.
So she could say, don't worry, I'll answer this one.
It's like, oh, what? You, our expert, don't know? Hey, I might know something. I, too, am an expert.
It's almost like my ego is so big that I couldn't deal with not being the star of an episode. So seasonal affective disorder, or even just, if you don't reach the diagnostic criteria to be diagnosed with this, but you still do feel gloomy on days where it's cloudy, or if you spend all day in a room with no windows.
Is it just one day, though, or does it need to be, like, prolonged
To get a diagnosis, you need to experience like clinical depression at the same seasonal time of year. So to reach the clinical depression diagnosis, you need to have been depressed for 2 weeks or more, and you need to have experienced for 2 years or more in a seasonal manner to get the actual diagnosis. But it does affect a lot of people. Like you can spend a day inside and find yourself feeling sad, and that's that's a human normal fine thing. That's it's a real thing. And there's essentially two different hypotheses that kind of, it can be a bit of both, sort of bit of column A, bit of column B situation here. We're not really sure exactly what's causing it, but it's most likely to be a combination of these two different things. The first one is circadian rhythms. So, your body's internal clock. So we all have this internal clock, and as you probably know, because, you experience jet lag, right? If you fly somewhere in a completely different time zone, you're going to feel out of whack. And it's because there's a lot of biological systems in our body that work on a 24-hour cycle. And the way that your body keeps this clock, you know, ticking in its nice 24-hour cycle, it's like, well, it's a super complex thing, but essentially a big factor that helps regulate it is exposure to natural light or certain wavelengths of artificial light. If you're matching the wavelengths of
does that turn different things off and on kind of in the brain?
So if you think about it, light enters through our eyeballs. Makes sense, right? Light comes in through our eyes, hits our retina, travels down the optic nerve and goes to a part of our brain. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is just fancy talk for just like a little part of our brain that's in our hypothalamus. So there's this part of our brain, what it does is it relays signals about how light it is outside or how much exposure you have to light to the pineal gland, which is a gland that releases a bunch of different hormones, but the important one for this particular instance is melatonin. And you might have heard of melatonin
That's
as
the sleepy
like,
sleep pill.
Yeah, the sleep hormone, the sleepy sleep. So melatonin gets released when it's dark outside. So when it's light outside and your pineal gland is getting these signals of light, it stops releasing melatonin. And what melatonin does, it lowers your heart rate, it lowers your body's temperature. It creates ideal situations in your body that make it easier for you to fall asleep, right? And so the opposite, obviously, when you have no melatonin, it keeps you awake. So if you think about it, this kind of makes sense. So if you're not getting a lot of light, if you're spending all day in the dark or in artificial light that's not the right wavelengths to be, you know, releasing, to be stopping the release of melatonin, like, of course you're going to feel really like lethargic and tired and gloomy and generally unmotivated to get out of bed, right? Because you're getting almost overexposure of this melatonin hormone that makes you sleepy. And that's just one side of the story. The second one is vitamin D. So we all know, go outside to get vitamin D, right? Like that's a thing that everyone it's well associated, the sun and vitamin D. But vitamin D is a really cool vitamin. I mean, most vitamins are really cool vitamins. I don't want to shit on any other. I don't want to shit on any other vitamins.
Are cool
I'm with Matt.
I mean,
Are they?
oh man, look at that cool guy. He takes a multivitamin every day, bro.
Well,
Whoa. Well, man, he doesn't even need a skateboard, bro. He's got his Centrum with him. Not sponsored.
Look, I don't know. Vitamin B helps with, I don't know, vision, I think. I'm just making shit up now. Vitamin C helps with iron absorption, which gives you energy. Vitamins they all have their role to play. But the cool thing about vitamin D is that it on its own can also act as a hormone.
What?
Right? So, yeah. So when you either, like, you can eat vitamin D, like supplements or whatever in food, or you can absorb it through your skin, or your skin actually synthesizes it with sunlight. It's really cool. But once you get it into your body, it goes into the liver and the kidneys, where it is converted into its active hormone form, which sounds really like crazy. But yeah, vitamin D is essentially turned into a hormone in your liver and your kidneys. And this hormone can actually activate genes in your body that regulate the release of a bunch of neurotransmitters, some of which you might recognize. Dopamine, serotonin.
The fun ones.
You know?
The happy, good time, feel good ones.
Happy, yeah. So, you know, dopamine is associated with feelings of reward and serotonin is well associated with mood and depression. Our main treatment for depression is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which work to increase the amount of serotonin in our brains. And so vitamin D, if you're vitamin D deficient, you are possibly not releasing as much or not getting the signal to release as much serotonin as you would if you had the right amount of vitamin D.
So does this mean vitamin D will cure my depression?
Yes. Do some yoga in the sun and you'll be happy as Larry. No. As with all, you know, mental illness things, it's never that simple. It's never that simple. But definitely, like, you know, spend some time out in the sun, get some vitamin D in your system, and you might find it does play like a small role in helping elevate your mood.
So for those people who can't do that, you know, people who live north of the Arctic Circle or whatever, what what should they do?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Could
Move.
vitamin D could vitamin D supplements help?
Well, yeah. See, vitamin D supplements are a thing, and they have developed a thing called phototherapy, or essentially light therapy, which is these certain types of like lamps or light globes that are different to your normal kind of halogen lights that you find in houses. That they actually release light of the correct wavelength that sort of simulates natural light, and that has been shown to help people suffering from depression and stuff, especially like seasonal affective disorder or seasonal depression. So you can find ways to get your vitamin D if you don't get exposure to sunlight. But if you are someone that is prone to developing this disorder and you get quite severe depression when you don't get natural light, my biggest suggestion, I'm not a medical doctor. Don't take my advice seriously, but my biggest suggestion would be take a holiday somewhere sunny, or maybe consider relocate. Like if depression is seriously derailing your life to the point that, you don't want to get out of bed, you're not happy, you're having thoughts of suicide, and you're living somewhere where you're getting no sunlight, like it might be a legitimate thing worth considering is moving somewhere more close to the equator where you get more sun or you get more,
I hate to bring it back to me, but I'm going to.
Because I'm the two egos fighting each other. No,
I
go.
have the microphone. No, this is why I love weather and climate science, because there's nothing that it doesn't affect in some way. Do you know what I mean?
I guess no matter what we do, we're existing in the atmosphere. We have to still breathe the air. We're affected by the weather.
Exactly. It affects what you wear, what you eat, how you feel, all the resources that you use. I don't know. I feel like neuroscience is so incredible, and there's so many amazing fields of science. But the more I learn,
all of science is amazing.
The more I learn about different fields of science, the more
you're like, it all comes back to climate.
It all comes back to weather and climate.
See, I told you the question was somewhat climate related.
I liked it.
Well, with climate science, I think for myself at least, and probably a large number of people listening, all I can think about when I think about climate science is, climate change, greenhouse gases, global warming, yada, yada, yada. It's all very doom and gloom and all about that kind of stuff. Is there anything, is there any other aspects to climate change that isn't about that? What else is climate?
Aspects to climate change? You mean aspects to climate science?
Climate science, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, there's lots and lots of climate science that is done that is not about climate change, or it tries to be. We're trying to figure out how different types of clouds form and where they form, and if that affects the type of rain that falls. We're trying to figure out what kind of weather patterns make it really hot or make it really cold in various parts of the world, and where do those weather patterns originate. Like I've done a project looking at really, really cold days in Melbourne and Perth, and I traced those weather patterns back to something that happened in South America, like the week before.
What?
How the atmosphere is all connected, how what's happening in the equator affects what's happening at the poles, how these El Nino and La Nina, like these random variations in one ocean can affect heat waves on the other side of the world. Like that stuff is so fascinating,
it's
how it's all connected.
Very interconnected.
It is so interconnected. And I think, I can't speak for all climate scientists, but sometimes I'm like, I just want to study that. People want to study those crazy interactions, but we can't because the system is changing so fast that you're like, but now it's not happening anymore, and now it's not happening the way it used to. So you end up studying the trends as much as you're studying the actual behavior itself, which is really important, and that's why we're here. But I think some climate scientists would be like, no, I didn't want to study the climate change. I wanted to study the climate science, because there's lots and lots to know.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Oh, the more that I look into all of these different like pockets of science and area of science, the more you kind of realize that there's so much we don't know, right? And there's just so much to learn, and it's just so exciting.
And that's just on Earth. Like, there's
that's
the whole fucking universe out there. Like, my biggest interest in science in school and what I thought about doing was like astrophysics and physics and that sort of stuff, because I'm just so fascinated by how fucking huge the damn universe is, how big everything is, how stars work and all that. And that's just a whole nother fucking kettle of fish. But there's, even just on our planet, there's so much going on this small scale. And just science is a beautiful way to explore it all. There's so many different fields, so many different facets, no matter what in particular piques your interest. There's a science out there for it.
Yeah,
that's so true. And it's funny, the more I learn about science and different components of how the natural world works, like the more that I progress as a scientist, the more I think, oh yeah, I can understand how different ways of thinking, because Western science is just a particular way of thinking and analysing the world. You're like, oh, I can understand how, 20,000 years ago when a volcano erupted, you would totally think because there's a deity or because there's you would think of a different way to explain that.
Exactly. Like I think humans have got this innate desire to explain everything happening around us, and without the resources that we have in top science institutions that we're lucky enough to work in, like you got to come up with those explanations somehow. And
I guess what makes science special and beautiful is that it's one of the few systems that's okay with being like, yeah, I don't know, hey, but we'll find out. We'll just keep trying until we find out, rather than trying to make up something to kind of fill in the gaps there.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's great. And I mean, all of science is just so interesting. And I think that's why I'm really excited that we're doing this podcast, Matt, and that we're getting to, create this medium where we're looking into all these different areas of science. Like, this isn't just a neuroscience podcast. Like, this is an everything science podcast. And so if you have any questions, any burning desires about any area of science whatsoever that piques your interest, remember you can always email us at curiosityrat@gmail.com, and you can find us on our social media, which is @curiosityrat on both Twitter and Instagram, or Curiosity Killed the Rat on Facebook as a page. Thank you so much for joining us today, Linden. We had a great time, and your insight was amazing, and I feel so honored that you came to join us. Would you like to tell the listeners, if they loved hearing your stuff, where can they find you? How can they track you down?
Well, I'm following Curiosity Killed the Rat on Twitter, so you can find me there, or I'm at Linden Ashcroft on Twitter. You can hunt me down in that place, or I speak on Einstein a Go-Go community radio show on Sunday mornings on 3RRR in Melbourne a couple of times a month. You can find that online as well. Or there's not a lot of Linden Ashcrofts in the world, to be honest. So you can
if you have a look, you'll probably find her.
Yeah. But thanks for having me. It's been a real honor.
Thank you so much for being our first guest on the show. Would love to.
So exciting.
Would love to have you back sometime to discuss these other aspects of climate change when we're in less of a dire situation and we can feel a little bit more free to just discuss some of the fun factoids.
We'll be more positive for sure. All right. And with that, peace out, homies.
Be positive like the dipolar Indian pattern.
No, you got it wrong.
What was it? What
Pacific.
Was it? Indian Ocean What was it again?
Yeah, there you go. Indian Ocean dipole.
Indian Ocean dipole.
Like the Indian Ocean dipole.
Be positive like the Indian Ocean dipole. There we go. We learned something. All right. Thanks very much for listening, guys. Peace out.
Curiosity. Kill the rat. Curiosity. Kill the rat.